Wall Street veteran Bernard Madoff has been arrested and charged with running a $50 billion Ponzi scheme.
Congress wants to know what caused the Enron meltdown.
Now, while the collective rage currently is focused on WorldCom,
Tyco CEO Dennis Kozlowski was convicted of looting hundreds of millions of dollars.
This is one of the biggest fraud cases ever.
Their president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook.
Find out more on this week's episode of White Collars, Red Hands.
The history of Taiwan, like many nations, is fraught with ambiguity of ownership and a struggle for power. After years of oppression in the early 1990s, it looked as if democracy was finally making its way to Taiwan. After decades of being under martial law, Taiwan held its first democratic presidential election in 1996. Although the winner was still a candidate with close ties to the country that maintained ownership of Taiwan, China, it was largely seen as a step in the right direction. However, the opposition party known as the Democratic Progressive Party, or DPP, created a buzz as calls for a stronger Taiwanese identity globally, and talks of Taiwanese independence grew from whispers to actual voices within the party. A man who would lead this party, named Chen Shui-bian, would be elected in the second Democratic presidential election of Taiwan, but would go on to be the face of corruption, leading a party that promised change, but delivered the same disappointment known by many citizens. Of course, that is, if you believe it wasn't all a political setup to begin with. This week, we dig into the history of Taiwan and how Chen Shui-bian, maybe, pulled off one of the largest political capers in their history on this episode of White Collars, Red Hands.
I guess it just kind of feels like what's happening now, where like people are voicing their opinions and then it's somebody shitty. I mean, it's not quite the same, but
so much in me wants to be like, it's so nuanced and there's so much more, just because, once again, I've gone down a rabbit hole, all right? And I learned a lot more about Taiwanese history this past week than
ever in your life.
Than I ever thought.
You've never learned this much about Taiwanese history.
Ever know. So you get to go on the journey that I went on, except for with less tabs open in your Google Chrome browser.
Yep, fair.
I got like straight up, I got one window open at half the screen, another window open the other half the screen.
I cannot do that.
Like 15 tabs open on each one, clicking back and forth between stuff as I do this. So you guys get to get the summary of my like ADHD hyperfixation for the past 7 days. So welcome. My name's Kashan.
And I'm Nina.
And today's ADHD hyperfixation is Taiwanese history and
hell yeah,
and the presidency and corruption conviction of Chen Shui-bian. So, you know what? We might as well just get into it.
Dive into it.
And just like in our episode on the Turkey corruption scandal, the gas for gold scandal, if you remember that, it's only been like a season and a half ago. This one, I feel, will need quite a bit of context for most of our listeners, because I'm assuming that you, like me, like I said, did not really know much about the geopolitical history of Taiwan. Maybe you do, and if you do, I'm so sorry for the first about half of this episode, because you're going to get a lot of stuff you already know. But if you didn't, welcome.
You know what? It's always nice to have a refresher. So
you're like, oh, well, you know, it's been a year or so since I really dug
deep into
climate
the
of Taiwan. Yeah. And since we are talking about a corrupt president, it is important to know quite a bit of Taiwan lore to understand his rise and his eventual fall from grace. So we're going to go all the way back to the beginning, right? The island of Taiwan, also known as Formosa, so if you see it referred to as such, don't be surprised. There's a really good Taiwanese history podcast called the Formosa Files that did a 4-part episode on this that they've only released 3 parts of, by the way. So go over there and get on them. They released them like 4 or 5 months apart. So I listened to the first 3 parts and then
are you just waiting for the last one to drop?
They haven't put it out. I don't know. The first one was in 2023. The third one was like late last year, and the 4th part just has not come out.
Oh, they're probably not finished.
No, but why would you take so long in between parts?
There's a lot of research.
It's fine. I'm not saying I'm not coming for the Formosa Files. You know, they obviously do great work. But so Formosa is another name for Taiwan. That was what all that boiled down to. So it is an island off the mainland of China in the South China Sea, kind of between Japan and the Philippines, if you know maps, unlike me. Taiwan is currently one of the most densely populated countries, and yes, I'm referring to it as a country, but that is contested, as we will soon find out. And it has a population of 23.9 million people, covering 168 islands and representing just under 14,000 square miles of land, which makes it one of the most densely populated countries in the world.
Wow.
Indigenous peoples have inhabited the island for more than 25,000 years, but it was annexed by the Qing dynasty of China in 1683.
Oh, so they've had this for a while.
Yes, it's
Yeah,
largely
had it for a while.
been under Chinese rule since then. However, after the first Sino-Japanese War was ended with a Chinese defeat in 1895, the Treaty of Shimonoseki ceded multiple things to Japan, including the island of Taiwan.
Yeah, they've had a lot of back and forth. I did know that.
Yeah, and this is also where it comes under where they're like, China nowadays will say, well, it's always been part of China. Mm-hmm. So they're just like a rogue defector. I don't like state kind of, but not a state, like a rogue defector, part of what has always been a very unified one China. Mm-hmm. But you're like, you gave them away.
Yeah, you did give them away.
You gave them away for 50 years, from 1895 until the end of World War II. So,
yeah, about 50 years.
And I think
that's like exact, actually.
Yeah, pretty much exactly. So you might remember though that Japan, not on the winning side of the Second World War.
They were not.
And China was with the Allied powers, which means that after the Axis powers were defeated, Japan was the one that needed to do some ceding to China. So in 1945. Exactly 50 years later, Taiwan returned back to the administrative control of the Republic of China. Of course, I mean, what would be better, right? After just fighting one of the worst wars in history in World War II, than just civil war.
They're like, we haven't had enough. We need more war.
We got all these guns.
What are we going to do with all of them?
We should use these somehow.
We really should use these guns.
And that's exactly what happened, as there was a communist uprising in China following World War II, leading to the ousting of the major political party, the KMT, and replacing it with the Mao Zedong-led Communist Party that we know and love of today, the People's Republic of China, in 1949. The KMT party leader, Chiang Kai-shek, was not captured as a result of this civil war, but he instead, with a bunch of other dissidents, withdrew to Taiwan, claiming it for the Republic of China, which is different than the Communist People's Republic of China.
No, not to be confused with the People's Republic of China.
Yeah, they really
just the Republic.
They
of
were
China.
really like, we're not going to change the name that much.
It's kind of like a Prince and the artist formerly known as Prince type of situation.
Well, because he changed his name to a symbol.
True.
At least they didn't do that.
They didn't.
That's
do that.
so confusing. So while the Republic of China took Taiwan, they still claimed ownership of all of China and claimed that the People's Republic of China were actually the dissidents and not the mainland's real rulers, even though they kind of had it. So they kind of were. And for a while, most Western countries, including the United States, also recognized the Republic of China, and by default Taiwan, because that's the only place they were, as the official representatives of China, even though they had no actual control over the mainland.
Okay, so Taiwan was the Republic of China.
The Republic of China.
And they were seen as the official representatives
of China.
Of all of China.
Yes.
While mainland China was the People's Republic of China, led by Mao Zedong.
Yes.
Okay.
But
was not officially recognized. Also, probably because, like they were communist.
Yeah, because of communism.
So, yeah.
But fun fact, even though they were communists, China's literacy rate skyrocketed during those years. 97% of the country was literate / became literate under Zedong's rule.
Fun fact. Of course, this would end in 1971 when the UN voted instead to recognize the People's Republic of China.
It is more land.
They were like, well, you've had it for like 2 decades. We're not doing this anymore. The Taiwanese people, who had spent the last 50 years, once again, completely separate from China under Japanese rule, originally were hopeful of their move back to the Republic of China, although things quickly became contentious. 2 years after they were brought back in 1947, tension had grown in Taiwan due to the harsh rule of KMT. They weren't like the coolest, the chillest leaders, you know. They also, they complained about economic mismanagement of the KMT in the Republic of China, as well as like very frequent political corruption. So there was a lot of friction between Taiwan and their rulers. And this exploded when on February 28th, 1974, during an anti-smuggling crackdown in Taiwan's capital city of Taipei, KMT authorities beat a Taiwanese woman that they suspected of selling contraband cigarettes. And when
this can't have those Marlboros in here. Pall Malls only, bitch.
You think they got like the Marlboro cowboy in Taiwan?
He came to Taiwan to sell the cigarettes, yes.
And when bystanders saw this and began to get angry at these authorities hitting this
Fair
woman,
enough.
an officer ended up firing into the crowd, hitting and killing a man, and also, I think, wounding at least one other, maybe. Not 100% sure on that, though. The next day, protests erupted across Taiwan. And in response, the appointed governor, Chen Yi, do you think he was chill?
No.
No, he wasn't chill at all. He called for military reinforcements that led to a very brutal and bloody military suppression of these protests, largely through just mass execution.
Man, that's horrible.
This lasted until May 16th, so the 27th to the 16th, and later estimates put the death toll anywhere from 18 to 28,000 people.
That's a lot.
Killed in that time. This obviously further divided the Taiwanese from their Chinese rulers, and what has been written in the history books as the 228 incident, February 28th, has been seen as a watershed moment for the push for Taiwanese independence. It also meant that when the Republic of China was ousted from the mainland to Taiwan, the citizens were not so happy with that now they are the only home to these people that have caused
chaos.
This terrible time. So in 1949, the Republic of China declared martial law in Taiwan, and it was declared for almost 40 years.
That is a very long time.
It was the longest time, actually.
Ever?
It was. But
that is difficult. That doesn't sound like a good time.
I think 48 years of martial law is probably the least fun time that I can imagine. Yeah. And this period of time that Taiwan was under martial law became known as the White Terror, and was marked by countless executions. Another 3,000 to 4,000 people were executed who were deemed politically opposed to the Republic of China rule or were sympathetic to the communist rule on mainland China. So not only were they going after the Taiwanese that didn't want the Republic of China there at all, they were going over other Chinese people that fled that were more sympathetic to communists. So it was a bad time. And amid this turmoil, one of the leaders who would attempt to pave the way to Taiwanese independence was born. Chen Shui-bian. So just a year after the declaration of martial law, Chen Shui-bian was born to a poor family in an already poor nation. While technically born in 1950, he was not provided a legal birth certificate until 1951, as was actually common practice because so many children would die in infancy.
Oh, wow.
That
is really sad.
If they were kind of sick, they were like, just wait. Because
they're like, we can't waste the paper and the ink.
Because this one might not make it.
Jesus.
There's just no point. But he made it. And his family were tenant farmers, which is a process akin to like sharecropping here in America. They live on the landlord's land and like till the land and then have to like, pay them a part of whatever they do.
Yeah.
So a bad system of living and usually
sounds bad.
Keeps the most poverty-stricken people even deeper
poorer.
in poverty.
Yeah.
So despite these extremely humble beginnings, Chen showed immense acumen in the classroom. He graduated from one of the best high schools in the country with honors and had his pick of where to attend university. And obviously, he decided to pick the best university in Taiwan, the aptly named National Taiwan University. You might think that with his grades, Chen would naturally want to become a doctor, right? Mm-hmm. That's what most people will push for in Taiwan. Yeah. But he opted instead for business administration as his major because he saw it as the best path to make money and finally lift his destitute family out of poverty.
Yeah, that's very understanding.
However, quickly after he got to university, he shifted his interest and his major to law, another well-paid occupation.
I was just going to say, when you said doctor, I was like, yeah, either doctor or lawyer is what people tend to go with.
Yeah, but I feel like you make less money as a lawyer.
It depends on what kind of law you're in. If you're doing corporate law, like right out of school, you make about $250,000.
And guess what he did?
Corporate law.
It was corporate law. And honestly, he didn't even need the degree because before he wrapped up his junior year, he took the bar exam. Not only did he pass, but he got the highest score allowable.
Shit.
And although he became the first student ever to do that, to get his license to practice law before graduating, he still wrapped up his degree.
That would make me feel better that my lawyer did finish school.
Yeah, and
because there's probably something you're going to miss in that last semester.
He passed the exam. Like honestly, the exam's way harder than the school. So it's like if you can get the highest score on the exam, you're fine. You're a savant.
Yeah, I have confidence.
You could have not graduated high school, but you're probably the best at it if you do that. But he graduated with his bachelor's of law in commercial law in 1974. His move into law from business administration was actually because he gained an interest in politics after he had a former middle school teacher that was publicly the victim of political persecution by the KMT. Wow. And that compounded with attending an election rally for like a KMT politician had broken from the party and was running as an independent and had a political rally like at the university. He attended it, and that combined with this like someone close to him was getting persecuted by the government pushed him towards law because he was more interested in politics now.
Interesting.
And while at university, it wasn't all work for Chen, right? He fell in love with a woman from an affluent family, Wushu Chen, which he had gone to middle school with. Actually,
cute.
They had reconnected at like a middle school reunion, literally, and she thought he was super boring, I guess.
Oh, well, the guy that got the perfect score on his bar exam, I figured would be like super interesting and fun.
Well, it's funny because he was like in the debate club and he was like practicing his like public speaking, but yeah, I guess he was just she said
he sounds like a fucking nerd.
She said he'd come over and just sit there and she would just talk the whole time.
Oh, that's my ideal man. What is she complaining about?
Oh my God.
Someone who only lets me talk the whole time?
Oh, you're a narcissist. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a yapper and a narcissist.
Like, I'm not a narcissist. I'm just the best.
I'm not a narcissist. I'm just better than everybody.
It's not narcissism if it's true.
Yeah.
Okay.
Get with it.
Okay. But
sorry that you don't understand. You aren't smart enough to get it, but that's okay. You might eventually be able to figure it out.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think I'm ever going to be that smart. So although there was some friction between her family as well, and
he was poor and they were rich.
That's exactly what it was.
Yeah,
her dad was a doctor, and wanted her to marry a doctor to like keep his practice going after he died because
nepotism.
Because he had a son, but the son was already doing something else.
The son was just stupid as fuck and couldn't be a doctor.
He was like, "Well, you need to." Oh, that's actually what it was. No, you're right.
Calling a lot of this today.
He didn't get good enough grades to be a doctor, so he was like, "You have to marry a doctor, or else there's no one to take on my practice."
Well,
but and also he was quite wealthy, and Chen Shui-bian literally came from a dirt poor farming family, so it was not the best. The distance actually between the two of them and how they grew up was so large that when he visited her college dorm for the first time, he supposedly mistook her wardrobe for a refrigerator because he didn't actually know what a refrigerator looked like.
oh, wow.
So he was like, "Is this your refrigerator?" And it was literally her like wardrobe.
Oh, wow.
And she's like, "No, that's where I put
This
clothes.
It's literally my dresser. That's insane.
That's where I put clothes in my path to Narnia." Actually, that is so. No matter, though, as the two were married in 1975, of course, without the attendance of Wu Shu-chen's family, they did not come. Chen Shui-bian went on to work as a partner at Formosa International Marine and Commercial Law, which provided maritime law services to clients, where he represented a Taiwanese shipping company.
That sounds boring.
Of course.
That job sounds very boring.
Of course, but I'm sure he made
Good money.
quite a bit of money.
Well, no one wants to do that job. So, yeah, you'd make good money.
Well, he worked there until 1989, but became more involved with politics in 1980 when he chose to defend multiple opposition party members. These are DPP members who were arrested at a protest demanding Taiwanese democracy for Human Rights Day. This incident took place in Kaohsiung province of Taiwan and became known as the Kaohsiung Incident. The Kaohsiung 8 were 8 prominent leaders that were put on trial by the KMT government, and Chen Shui-bian represented the opposition leader Huan Xin-xie. But Chen's future vice president, Annette Lu, was also one of the Kaohsiung 8.
Where did Annette Lu come from?
Annette Lu?
This is like the most, this is like a very English name.
There's a guy named Frank later.
Oh,
so why there are some names that seem more familiar to a Westerner in these, I don't know.
Yeah. Sounds like that's like when the foreign exchange students would come from China and they would be like, "Hi, I'm Lucinda," and I'm like, "No, you're not.
Yeah,
That's not your name."
When I was doing my master's, half the program was literally like when they stepped out to go to the school, it was like their first time in America from China. And yeah, they were always like, "My name's Sylvia." And I'm like, "No, it's not."
That's not.
I saw your name. It's Han Xiao.
Yeah.
But they're always just like, "It's hard for you to say." And I was like, you don't have to do this.
You don't have to do that.
I was like, you don't have to do that. Like,
You're like, "My name's Kashan."
yeah, I was like, "I will learn if you want." And they're like, "Just call me Sylvia." I'm like, "Okay, whatever you want."
All right, Sylvia.
But just so you know, you don't have to do this. But yeah, Annette, yeah, I don't know. Obviously, though, this was heavily politically motivated. The KMT government was trying to repress political resistance, you know. So all 8 were convicted despite Chen's efforts, and they were sentenced to anywhere between 12 years to life in prison.
Seems like a lot.
Over just like hosting a protest. So none of them served their full time, however, but some people did serve like 7 to 9 years. And many did go on to hold political office not long after their release. This publicly led Chen to winning a seat on the Taipei City Council. I don't know if I mentioned this, that is the capital city of Taiwan.
You did, yeah.
Okay. He won a seat on the city council in 1981, and his political activism led him to start an association that published the Neo Formosa magazine, which supported the opposition to the KMT party. This, however, landed him in some hot water, though, as the Neo Formosa published a story that claimed a prominent member of the New Party, which is another like Chinese nationalist party, accused this member, Elmer, there's another one for you,
Yeah.
Elmer Fun, of plagiarizing his doctoral dissertation.
Ooh.
This got Chen slapped with a libel charge, though, which is not just a civil crime there, but a criminal charge. And he was convicted and sentenced to a year in prison for libel, dude. But while he was appealing the decision, he still ran for county magistrate in Tainan County in 1985. He would ultimately go on to lose that election for magistrate. So, but it was tradition in Taiwan to go on tour to thank your supporters, whether you won or lost an election. So he was off on his thank you tour with his running mate, and that's when things got a little bit worse for him. His wife, Wu Shu-chen, was actually hit twice by a hand tractor, which it kind of looks like the front half of a quad, and then attached is like a trailer for hauling goods.
Okay.
It, like, by definition is a one axle like trailer hauler.
Okay.
This accident left Wu Shu-chen paralyzed from the waist down.
Oh, that's horrible.
And she would need a wheelchair for the rest of she's still alive, but she has needed a wheelchair for the rest of her life. It also started speculation that it had maybe been planned by the government. Like, there was like this idea that the government had purposely done this, because she also got hit twice.
Yeah, how do you get hit
Like
twice by that thing?
He hit her twice.
So, like, he hit her and then backed up?
I don't know.
Like, what the fuck?
I don't know the details, but everything said she got hit twice.
Yeah.
So,
seems a little fishy.
and supposedly this was to intimidate Chen Shui-bian from pushing his idea of Taiwanese independence, which he was, pushing a lot in the Neo-Formosa and in a lot of the things he said. Although there is no definitive evidence for this, I should obviously say. We don't really know. Things continued poorly for Chen as he lost his appeal and did end up going to prison for that libel conviction in 1986, serving 7 months of his 1-year sentence. Meanwhile, his wife actually also took up politics in this time and was elected to the legislative yuan, which is kind of like if the Senate and the House of Representatives were like one thing. It's kind of like a parliament, I guess. Like, the entire legislative branch was just like one group.
Okay.
And she did this while Chen was in prison for those 7 months. After his release, he actually served as his wife's chief counsel.
Oh, cool.
Until he himself was elected to the legislative yuan in 1989.
What a power couple.
Yeah,
Slay.
The year later, she did not run for re-election and instead focused on being like a wife and political supporter. So, but she did. She was there for a little bit.
Yeah.
They actually have had quite a few elected female leaders in
That's
Taiwan.
cool.
Believe it or not,
Very cool.
they had their first female president in 2016. He quickly gained support in the Democratic Progressive Party, serving as the executive director of the caucus in the Yuan, which kind of made him the party's de facto leader, kind of like the Senate minority leader. But we only have two parties, so if there was more than two. And he was instrumental in laying the plans for the party, specifically in their plans to declare independence for Taiwan, including something that became known as the 4 ifs, that basically said Taiwan, we want to push for immediate declaration of Taiwanese independence if one of these 4 things happen. If the KMT unilaterally holds talks with the Chinese communists.
Okay.
If the KMT sold out the interests of the people of Taiwan. Was a little open, but okay.
Yeah, open to interpretation.
If the Chinese communists annexed Taiwan, that one seems to make sense, and if the KMT did not implement true constitutional democracy, I guess that one's also kind of open.
Yeah.
But that was a big part of their political stance. Their
platform.
Yes, their platform. This was popular. Not with KMT supporters or the Republic of China supporters that had fled from the mainland so many decades before, but with enough people that Chen won an election to be the mayor of Taipei in 1994.
Okay, he's moving up.
He only got 43.67% of the vote, though, because Chinese nationalist votes were split enough between the KMT and New Party candidates that Chen took home the victory.
Nice.
It literally, the New Party runner had split from the KMT. They both ran. This guy lost and said, I'll just run as a different party. So they split, and then he won with 43% of the vote. He was also extremely popular amongst citizens during his mayoral tenure. He led successful campaigns to get rid of illegal gambling and prostitution in the city.
Oh, so he just ruined everybody's fun?
Well, at least for illegal gambling and prostitution.
Yeah.
He made a shift towards cutting down pollution and focus on sustainability. He built parks on municipal land that had been squatted on by KMT affiliates, actually naming one of these the 228 Peace Memorial Park after the 228 incident. So that's
good things.
Pretty progressive against the KMT government. He repaired infrastructure and renamed roads to better reflect Taiwan's identity. Notably, he renamed a road that ran right outside of the mayor's office to Katagalan Boulevard after an Aboriginal people of the Taiwanese Valley, where before it had a name that was a reference to Chiang Kai-shek, the leader of the Republic of China that took over Taiwan. When he came up for re-election in 1998, he managed to get more total votes and a higher percentage of votes backed by his very popular things that he did in his first term. But the Popular Party rallied behind the KMT. The vote was not split like last time, and Chen actually did lose the election.
Oh, that sucks, because it seems like he did a lot of good things for the city.
Yeah, they just the other party got their stuff together, and they just had enough of the votes.
Had enough of the vote. Yeah.
He instead took 2 years to build a campaign for president, touring the world to meet with prominent political leaders. I know that he got endorsements from like a prominent leader in Japan and a prominent leader in South Korea. And when the 2000 election came, his opposition nationally did not learn from the Taipei mayoral elections. Chen won the presidential election in 2000 with only 39% of the vote.
Wow.
A slim margin over the independent nominee, James Sung, who once again broke off from the KMT to run as an independent because the vote was split, and he got 37% of the vote. So he
still
won
pretty close.
like 2%. Yeah, as far as elections go, pretty close.
It's a slim margin.
Or kind of far. Elections are always close.
Yeah.
I don't know. Immediately upon his entry into office, Chen Shui-bian realized that he was still deadlocked in policy, as many KMT public officials were still in the legislative yuan and would not be able to push an agenda. So he instead tried to reach across the aisle. He appointed KMT affiliates to almost half of his original cabinet positions, from the this would be like if we elected a Democratic
and
president.
then he was like putting Republicans in the office.
Yeah, in his cabinet.
Right, in his cabinet.
Like half of the cabinet was Republicans.
Interesting.
They might do like one or two. They used to do that more often than they do now, but like half is a lot.
Yeah.
And he also pledged that Taiwan would not declare independence from China unless they launched military action against the island, which they had dreaded a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a good thing to put on. I'd be like, well, if you attack us, we'll,
Yeah, then we're going to...
Then we'll be independent. But until then, we'll be chill. We're chilling. And this worked. A few weeks into his presidency, he held an approval rating of 70%. But it had nowhere to go but down from there, obviously. That's pretty high. So that year, a recession hit Taiwan and actually the rest of Asia, and stock markets crashed and unemployment rose in Taiwan. To top this off, most of Chen's attempts to pass policy were just deadlocked by the KMT-controlled legislature. He really couldn't get anything passed through without huge concessions. He faced criticism for defunding a multi-billion-dollar project to build a nuclear power plant that had actually already been started and like a fourth of the way completed, citing environmental issues. But they had already spent like $1 billion, and they would still have like $3 billion more to spend. And he was just like, "No, we're gonna stop."
I mean, I don't really blame him on that one.
Yeah, well, it's just that people
especially
were upset
if it
about
was, yeah.
Especially the KMT, and they responded by trying to recall Chen from office, like vote, because basically what they have to do is they have to get a certain majority of people in the legislature to put to a vote to the people to recall him from office. Like, it's kind of like if an impeachment of the president had to be done by like a democratic, like nationwide vote. But for that vote to pass, the legislature had to pass it.
Okay.
It never even got to that point at this point, but they tried. And by the end of his first year in office,
his 70% approval rating had dropped to 25%.
Oh, wow. That plummeted.
Over the next few years, he slowly stopped trying to lean across the aisle and started angering China by making subtle moves towards a more independent Taiwan. On the Republic of China passports that they print, they started putting like Taiwan on it, which had not been there before. And they also started replacing China with Taiwan in names of multiple like state-owned businesses. And he also made multiple visits to the USA to receive awards, which upset them because it like every time that he would receive an award in the Western world, it would seem to like legitimize the Taiwanese government over the Chinese government. So that always upset them too. He also upset KMT members and supporters of the Republic of China by removing many pictures of their former leader, Chiang Kai-shek, that had hung in political offices for decades. He took them down and in like political offices, like replaced it with a picture of himself.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he's the president. So like it's like in the presidential building, he took down the Chiang Kai-shek and put up pictures of him.
And that pissed people off.
Oh, hell yeah. Hell yeah. Because all the people that are in the KMT party are still very very chill and cool with what went on during the White Terror because they came from China.
Yeah.
But all the people that were in Taiwan and descendants of people that were in Taiwan, they're very not cool with it.
Yeah.
Because they killed so many people.
Yeah.
You know, it's a not cool situation. This would lead you to believe, right, that he caused so much of a stir. His approval rating was so low that when he ran for re-election in 2004, that he would be absolutely steamrolled, right?
Yeah.
And he probably would have been if he didn't get shot.
Interesting.
Literally the day before the election, he was shot in the stomach in Tainan while campaigning. It is believed that the sympathy from this incident is what squeaked Chen across the finish line, as he was reelected by just 30,000 votes out of 12.9 million votes cast.
That is not much.
That is 0.23% of the votes.
Damn. That
is a slim margin.
That's a slim margin. I take back what I said about 2%.
And a close election, yeah. There was also speculation put out that he somehow faked this to get the sympathy. That one's a little crazy to me. It is like a little like tinfoil hat like conspiracy thing though, where the main guy that they were like the main suspect that they think shot him. They did so because of a suicide letter that he wrote. Like he was found dead in like a canal like 7 days after the attempted assassination. And supposedly in his suicide note, he had wrote down a confession, but his family had burned the suicide notes.
Oh, convenient. That's convenient.
So there's still like speculation about
who actually did it.
Or who knows, maybe it was the KMT and they
framed him.
They had hired someone to kill him and it just got botched, so they drowned him in a river. Who knows?
I mean, none of that sounds too crazy.
Well, the KMT had done stuff like that. Remember the Kaohsiung 8 that I mentioned? One of the people that was convicted there, his whole his family was murdered while he was in prison awaiting trial, even though his house was supposedly under 24-hour police surveillance. They were stabbed to death in their house.
Yeah, somebody wasn't watching. Somebody wasn't doing their job, or somebody did a job a different job.
That's what I'm saying. So could be.
Yeah.
Tinfoil hat off. Chen's son-in-law, Chao Chien-ming, was arrested 2 years into his second term in May of 2006 and charged with insider trading and embezzlement. It turns out he had met with the chairman of the board for a bank that was about to give big bailout money to a land development company, and he bought shares before it was publicly announced. So he made a bunch of money, which obviously is insider trading. And his son-in-law was found guilty and sentenced to 6 years in prison in late 2006. But this kind of kicked off a whole scrutiny of Chen's financial dealings and those of his close family. This led to his wife, along with others, being indicted on corruption charges in November of 2006. She was accused of faking documents in order to personally enrich herself of about $450,000 of governmental money. And they supposedly did this by creating fake invoices to pull money out of a state affairs fund that was intended for national security expenses, and instead just diverted the money into their own personal accounts.
I thought you were going to say for a minute that she faked being in a wheelchair.
No, she's very much She's very much really in a wheelchair.
Okay.
Or she's just really good at faking it.
She's just like super good at not walking.
But as far as we know, she's rolling everywhere.
They see me rolling.
They also accused his wife of accepting routine bribes in the forms of kickbacks for multiple companies that were granted governmental contracts. They also accused Chen himself of being an accomplice to this, at least at the beginning, in these fake invoices / bribery schemes, as obviously he would have to be, since the First Lady likely couldn't do something like this alone.
Right.
But the Constitution actually provided him with kind of general immunity from being prosecuted for a crime while he was still president. So they just said that he is like a suspected accomplice. And they said outright that, like, yeah, once he's not the president, he's probably going to get arrested.
Yeah.
Chen publicly announced that he was ceding control of the government, of all governmental matters, to the leader of the Yuan, the legislature, known as the premier, kind of like a prime minister, I guess, and would only retain power where the Constitution required him to in matters like foreign affairs. But the day-to-day runnings were going to be done by the premier, and he announced that. Despite this step, the KMT again pushed to recall him from the presidency. And there was some push inside the DPP, his own party, to publicly explain the charges. He was getting some pushback from inside now. So Chen publicly showed receipts and supporting evidence for the charges to the accounts. Despite this, though, there were multiple public demonstrations and protests calling for him to resign, which he did not do. That vote to recall him, they did finally put that to a vote. All of the KMT members voted to put the recall to a vote, and everyone else abstained, so it didn't pass. They missed by like 20 votes or something.
Wow.
So despite this, there were public demonstrations calling for him to resign, which he did not do. And he was not recalled, but the voters ended his tenure in 2008. I think they only have a two-policy thing anyway, or a two-term thing anyway, so I don't think he could have ran for re-election a third time, but whatever. The DPP candidate, Frank Xie, lost by a good margin to KMT Representative Ma Yingzhu, and Chen stepped down in May of 2008. Now, without immunity, he was directed not to leave Taiwan. Ooh. You better not be going nowhere. And the new president declassified financial documents from Chen's presidency. Oh. And after a 2-year investigation, it was determined that Chen and his wife had amassed $200 million in the form of kickback bribes while he was in office.
Wow.
Which they then laundered through Swiss bank accounts and shell companies in the Cayman Islands before being used to buy luxury property overseas and luxury goods such as jewelry. They further obscured these transactions by having accounts be not listed in their names, but in the names of close relatives. And this was discovered from those declassified documents, as well as the Swiss authorities fully complied with the investigation. So they had information directly from the banks. And because of this, the Chen family had originally denied even owning overseas accounts, but later switched to saying, okay, well, we do own the accounts, but all that money that went through them actually wasn't embezzled from the government, but rather from political campaign donations, which I think is equally,
I don't know,
maybe not equally as bad, but
embezzling's embezzling.
It's like,
so
it's still illegal, I'm pretty sure.
It's not good.
Don't think that is much better. In the end, Chen Shui-bian and Wu Shu-chen were both convicted of corruption charges and sentenced to life in prison.
Damn, I can't imagine being in prison and being in a wheelchair at the same time. That would suck.
Well, she doesn't have to either. She didn't go to prison.
Oh, I thought you said him and his wife.
Oh, she was sentenced to life in prison for sure.
Oh.
But she was deemed too ill to serve time and was placed on house arrest, so she never went to prison
All right.
because she was in a wheelchair.
Okay.
They were also slapped with a $6.13 million fine, which was way less than what
that's like
they funneled through, by the
less.
way. But, I mean, I guess if you're putting them in prison for life,
Yeah.
all right.
I mean, they can't spend their money anyway.
So later, though, his sentence was reduced to 20 years. And obviously, I mentioned Wu Shu-chen never actually served a day in prison. Chen Shui-bian had a difficult time in prison.
I would assume.
Where he was diagnosed with multiple cognitive disorders. He was said to have a minor stroke while he was in prison. He was diagnosed with clinical depression. He purportedly attempted suicide in 2013. And in January of 2015, he was granted a medical release from prison on medical parole, after serving just 6 years. He was still restrained on the amount of public and political appearances he made. He was actually not supposed to speak publicly about anything political as part of his release.
Okay.
However, he has hosted a non-political radio program since 2021.
Interesting.
And was spotted at a political ceremony in 2024. And he also still seems to be in perfect physical health.
Well, I felt better once he got out of jail.
Yeah.
I feel better now that I left.
It's definitely feel good now.
I feel good now.
In the end, there was a lot of controversy over Chen Shui-bian and his corruption case. People on his side say that the entire trial and the sentencing was merely political theater put on by the KMT to downplay Taiwanese independence. And a lot of it was just made up or blown out of proportion. They cite the fact that he was held in jail without bail for 600 days while going through trial before actually proving him guilty, which people did think was excessive, and to all the other atrocities that the party had committed in the past. They also say that this is it had been the norm for politicians, so no matter what party you were from, and that this was just selective prosecuting by the KMT. They said, we'll go after him because he's a political opponent.
Okay.
Opponents to him say that, there is obviously credible evidence for the forgery and the bribery that was going on in the Chen administration, and that a crackdown on corruption is exactly what they needed at the moment. Most people, though, in Taiwan, and me included here, think that Chen Shui-bian almost definitely committed the crimes.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
That he was accused of. There's a lot of evidence that seems, that doesn't just come from the government, that seems like he definitely was making money from somewhere and funneling it through a lot of very shady routes. But that the sentencing that followed was likely politically motivated. Life in prison, even reduced to 20 years, is still
That's a lot.
quite a lot for what he did.
And then you only serve 6.
And his wife. The KMT wanted to get him out of there. But recently, the DPP has made a resurgence and have actually held the presidential position since 2016. And obviously, the topic of independence from and distancing from mainland China is still a hot button issue, not just in Taiwan, but on the international stage for them. It's still, and I would just like to say, America's official stance is not wanting Taiwan to declare independence.
Oh, interesting.
So they've kept a purposeful ambiguity where they keep a faux embassy in Taiwan, but they really try to avoid declaring
A side.
declaring a side because they don't want China to annex Taiwan. They have said that if China does use military to invade Taiwan, that they would intervene. But they keep it President Biden said multiple times that he was not for Taiwan declaring independence either. So it's a complicated issue.
Very complicated.
But
thank you, as that is the end. You got a little of my hyperfixation for the week on Taiwanese history. And I know more than I ever thought I would. And now hopefully you do as well. So if you appreciate the amount of tabs I had open on my computer to make this, you can help us out and show some support for the show, please, by leaving a review. You can write a review on Apple Podcasts, or you can leave a star review also on there, or on Spotify. If you're on Spotify, hey, guess what? You get to see our nice faces. We post video podcasts to Spotify and over our YouTube page, White Collars, Red Hands on YouTube, obviously. You can catch us on our socials. You can DM us at Instagram at whitecollars_red hands, Twitter at or X. I keep doing that at white collars.
I know. I think I said Twitter last week.
It's just ingrained.
Old habits die hard.
But that's White Collars Pod. Facebook at White Collars Red Hands. We're on TikTok at White Collars Red Hands. And I already said YouTube, so there. You can go to our website. Guess what it is? It's whitecollarsredhands.com.
OMG!
You can go there, you can check out our merch. You can buy some merch, give us some actual money, or at least 15% of whatever you spend on TeePublic goes straight to us. So you can find that link there on our website, or you can find it in the show description. The show description, not the episode description. So feel free, grab some merch. You can also contact us through our website to suggest an episode. That goes straight to our email, though, too. So if you don't want to go to our website, you just want to send us an email, that's whitecollarsredhands@gmail.com. The best thing you can do, though, is be like, hey, did you know all about Taiwan and Chinese history? Well, there's these two white people that talked about it on a podcast about white-collar crime. You can get it there. So feel free to recommend us to a friend. It's the best way to spread the podcast love. And you know what? Nina's falling asleep because she has a chronic illness.
I feel a lot better than I did a little bit ago.
So I think that's it. Is that it? All right. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. We'll see you next week on another episode of White Collars,
Red Hands.